Hey everyone, Eran Stern here with another two-part tutorial. This time I thought to share with you something I did recently, which will be much fun, and hopefully along the way you will learn some new techniques as well. First I want to show you the final outcome so you'll know what to expect. So here it is. A special sci-fi week of classics movie. Don't you just love it? I know I do. So the first part is all about the projected screen you see here. I'll show you how to design it from scratch, and then on the second part we'll use some tricks in order to nicely project it and float it in thin space air. Very exciting. We can also see an interesting 3D titles here with some deformers and shutters. More on that later on. But now let's start our Labor Day by creating the screen itself. At the beginning I want to create the old classic spaceship look. So for that let's create a new composition. We will call it sphere because this will be the general shape of our spaceship. And the width and the height should be 800 pixels by 800 pixels. Duration is 10 seconds and pixel aspect ratio is square pixels. So I will choose OK and create a new solid by clicking Ctrl or Command plus Y. And just make sure it's comp size and choose OK. The first effect we want to apply is under Generate Grid. Let's just change it quickly from corner point to width and height sliders and set it to 40 by 40. Also I want to set a thick border, so maybe 25. And as a last step here I will choose invert grid. So we will just be left with these nice tiny squares. Now we can collapse this grid effect, and on top of this let's go to Effect, Perspective and choose the CC Sphere. But we just want to see the outside of the sphere, so just select the outside and maybe increase the radius of it. So maybe say 300 or maybe even something bigger. You will be the boss of it. And now let's drill down the rotation and change the rotation of the X to something interesting, maybe 60 degrees or maybe 45, something like this should look very interesting. And now we want to animate the rotation of the Y, so it will look like it's swiveling in mid-air. So for that, let's just make sure we are at the first frame of the comp and record a keyframe for rotation Y at this frame. Go to the end of the timeline and add here 2, so it will rotate 2 times the whole thing. So it's nice and slow. And this is exactly what I'm aiming for. And actually we can close this effect and let's add under Effect, Stylize, the glow effect. Just raise the glow radius to maybe 60 here, and you can also push the glow intensity to maybe 1.5. Now the problem that we have here is that the pixels underneath are still transparent, so once we will combine everything together it won't look so good. So let's fix it very quickly by generating a shape tool here. So just double click on the shape tool, it will fill the whole screen, and just scale it and move it under our layer. And also let's change the fill attributes by pressing the fill, move it to a radial gradient, and then press the radial gradient again and just edit the color. So maybe like a nice blue on the left side and black on the other one. Then take the little handle here and just push it until the end of the shape here. So again, we want to make sure that we are not leaving hard edges here. So make sure the shape layer is still selected and just type here fast blur, which should isolate the fast blur effect. And let's just push it to maybe around 30 pixels. Let's look at it, and it looks very nice. And maybe I want to just scale it a little bit down so we can still see the out of this nice shape that we did. So we can close everything, come back to the project panel, and now let's design the screen that we will project later on thin air in space. So for that, let's create a new composition. We'll name this one screen, and we'll choose a PAL square pixels. The duration is still 10 seconds, and let's choose OK here. Now, before we will drop the sphere inside, I want to use a nice background. So here I've got stars_1. I've got this background from the NASA website, and if it is for educational purposes, they even encourage you to use it. Hopefully we are learning new things here, so the educational thing is valid. So first let's scale it a little bit down so we can see more of this amazing picture. And this was taken by the Space Telescope Hubble, which is amazing to my opinion. Anyway, let's collapse it for a moment and bring down our sphere spaceship. And we want to mess with it a little bit. So first let me just hit Alt to get the rotation attributes and just choose an interesting angle for it, maybe minus 35 degrees or something like this, and just place it here on the top edge of the screen. And then immediately I will duplicate another copy, go and place it on the opposite side, but I just want the same angle, so we will just flip it, something like plus 145, and maybe place it over here. And also want to scale it, so by pressing S I can do exactly that and maybe place it somewhere here. Okay, so this is what we have so far. It is definitely not the best design ever, but it will serve us very nicely on the next stage. So let's just stop the RAM preview and take the Aliens title and drop it into our timeline. And as you can read, it says Aliens ate my Volvo. This is of course based on an old Thomas Dolby cover which originally says Aliens ate my Buick. But since I don't have a Buick, I thought I'd change it to Aliens ate my Volvo. Come to think about it, I don't have a Volvo either. Anyway, aliens ate it, so maybe this is the reason I don't have it. So now I want to play with it a little bit and maybe enhance the design here. So I will hit S and make sure the continuously rasterize is set to on, so I can scale it to whatever size I like, play with it and maybe leave it, maybe something like this should work nicely. Now I want to animate, but I want to animate it very quickly and everything together, so I will use parenting for this. So at the first stage, let me just hit S in order to see the scale properties of this layer, grab all the layers and just parent them to the aliens one. So now once we will animate this one, everything will follow along and then we will do our own corrections. We will start at 2 seconds by placing a keyframe on the scale value, then return to 1 second and maybe drag everything down, maybe I think to say 60%, something like this. And now I don't want the background to be so much affected, so I can still come back to it, press scale, and remember we have a lot of pixels to work with, so let's just make sure it will be on all of the screens. So now it will still be animated and come with us. And also I want to make sure that our sphere will not be visible at the first frame, so they will just come into the screen in this 1 second animation. So let's select them and hit P in order to see their position properties and make sure we will record a keyframe for both of them. Go to the 2 second mark and add the same keyframe. Now let's go back and select each one of the sphere. We will start with the upper one and just place it outside our canvas. Same goes to the other one, and the result will be that the animation will start from nothing here, which means we can see only the title, and then during 1 second everything will come into shape. So something like this, and now we can see everything. We might want to affect the opacity, so I don't want to see anything here. So let's just make sure we select everything and then just drill down the opacity for the aliens title and bring it down to 0. And remember, opacity will not inherit it by these other layers because this is something which parent doesn't affect. So parenting will not affect opacity. So now we can see we have a nice fade in and everything comes together. I also want to generate a nice motion blur when everything comes into the screen. So let me just make sure that motion blur is enabled for all layers and enabled for the comp itself. But as you can see, we don't have enough motion blur here. I just want to exaggerate it a little bit more. So by going to composition settings, and under advanced, change here the shutter angle to its maximum, which is 720, and choosing OK, we'll now have a nice strong motion blur with the same views and the same keyframes that we already have. Now let's make sure we will select everything, hit U to see our keyframe, and just select all the last keyframe here and hit F9 in order to easy ease into this keyframe. So let's just watch what we have since the beginning of the timeline, which is also the beginning of time itself. I don't know if you know this. And let's just preview it in real time. Exactly what I wanted. So this is ready for the next stage. So let's just close everything, and I want to enhance it by adding a nice laser beam which will go from the point of the second sphere. In order to do so, let's go to layer, new, and select an adjustment layer. And here in the effects and preset, you can just start to type beam and double click in order to get the beam effect. So first we need to composite it on original in order to see it. Let's quickly change a few parameters here in order to get it to the look that we are after. I will leave the starting thickness as is, but I will change the ending to maybe 100, so we will have a very strong beam. Also, let's change the length to be from the beginning to the end, which is 100%. And let's just press on the starting point and make sure we will place it here in the middle of this globe. And the end will be somewhere here, I think. And I want to make it move a little bit, make it vibrate, maybe something like this. So we can do it with a very easy expression. So let's just make sure we will hold Alt or Option and click on the ending point in order to generate an expression on the timeline. And the expression should be something like this: wiggle, open parentheses, and we will do very low frequency, maybe 2, and then comma 100, meaning 100 pixels to each direction, close parentheses, and press enter in order to examine the effect. And this is exactly what I need. Now just make sure that we don't have this beam from the beginning, so we might want to animate it. And the best way to animate the beam effect is use the time value here. So here where we are at 2 seconds, I will record the keyframe and set the time to 0, then move forward maybe half a second and bring it back to 50%. So let's just preview this section. Very nice, but we do see the beam effect before it's time, before we want to see it. So let's just make sure that just before it will arrive into the screen, something like this, we will hit T, record a keyframe for opacity at 0, move forward few frames and raise it to 100%. And let's just hit U in order to see all keyframe. Take these 2 keyframes and just place it after. So nothing is visible here, and then our beam is starting to show itself. And maybe we want to add another beam, so it's very easy. Just select it in the effect menu and just hit Ctrl or Command D in order to duplicate another copy. And we just want to leave everything as is, but maybe change the end position to maybe something like this. And remember, this will still comes with the wiggle effect. So by pressing U, you can see that now we have 2 beams. And let's just take the keyframe of the second one and just slide them a little bit in order to get some variety. Now we can switch to full frame view and create a RAM preview to see how all the elements are animating together. This concludes the first part of our exercise. On the second part, we will take this screen design and project it in thin air, in space, and this will be very exciting. Anyway, I hope you learned something new here as well, and until next time, this is Eran Stern for CreativeCow.net saying goodbye.